I
Okay.
yesterday and the day before, and I have a note and my sister.
Oh, I'm going to be making an announcement.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Lisa has been with us so many times, I just kind of ignored her. I brought her in and everybody was very friendly to her and she seemed to be able to talk to people. So I don't really have to introduce her. This is her talk, and take it away, Lisa.
Oh, thanks.
Yay.
Well, I am so happy to be back, and it's a pleasure to see you and see friendly faces when I come in. If I talk like this, will you all be able to hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, this is my subject. I said to Sue, this is the last of the talks that I have not spoken to you about yet, that I really enjoy and I'm really enthusiastic about. And the subject is the painting Peals of Philadelphia. So I'll just launch into it. If you have questions or anything you want to say, please just break in.
We do reruns, by the way, anytime. I'm serious. Anytime you want to rerun these, they're so fabulous.
You're so nice.
Yeah.
You're my favorite audience ever.
What does Peals?
Are they people? Well, I'm going to let you know. It's a bunch of people. It's a family. And so I'm going to start telling you about the father of the family and then kind of branch out into the children. Okay? And so this is a self-portrait of the father, kind of the founder of the family. And his name was Charles Wilson Peel. No relation to that Peel, that famous preacher Peel.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to say.
Norman Vincent Peel.
Right, not him. But this is Charles Wilson Peel. He spelled his name Wilson with 2 L's. And he was, I hope you will agree, a really interesting guy. I'm going to try to convince you. He was a wonderful father to this family that I'm going to tell you about. He was an amazing American patriot, and I hope you'll agree with that. He was an incredible inventor and kind of founder of science in our country, but he was kind of a second-rate painter.
Oh dear.
So I'll let you reach your own conclusion about that, but I want to be right out of the box. People don't rate him among the very first. But
He painted this?
This is his self-portrait, one of his self-portraits.
I'd say it's pretty good.
Okay, towards the end of his life, the beginning of his life was 1741. He was born in Baltimore in 1741. The reason that he was born in Baltimore is that his father was convicted of a criminal offense in England and was offered the choice of either being executed immediately or being sent to the colony of the what was going to be the United States. It was like a criminal kind of thing, and he opted to come to Baltimore, and that's where Charles Wilson Peel and several brothers and sisters were born.
So our forefathers are murderers.
A lot of them were. Yeah. He was actually an embezzler.
Was he an artist also?
The father was not. Except at crime, I suppose. But anyway, he died shortly after his children were born. So from the very beginning, Charles Wilson Peel, from the time he was 13, it was on him to support his mother and his brothers and sisters, because he was the oldest of the family. So he was really, and you can imagine Baltimore, the colonies in 1741, it wasn't easy to make a living just to support yourself. And so every opportunity that came along to support, this large family, he was like up for it. Whatever it was, he was like, if I can make a little bit of money doing it, I'm going to do it. So the first thing that he was actually apprenticed as was a saddle maker. So he knew how to sew, he could sew leather, he could make, fittings for horses, he could make saddles. But there wasn't enough money in Baltimore at that time to support all these people. So, for example, one guy came through town and who knew how to repair clocks. And he said, I could do that, and he kind of paid a few dollars to learn to repair clocks, adding to his little income to support all these people. A sign maker came through town, painting kind of early American signage, and Peel said, well, I could do that, and he learned how to make signs and how to paint carriages. A portrait painter came through town, painting things like this, the early American flat kind of portrait. And Peel said, well, if I can paint signs, I can do that. And he took up making, so you could go to his saddlery, you could get saddles, you could get your watch repaired, you could have signage repaired, whatever he could do to make a little bit of money, because he was interested in supporting people.
Does the rose signify anything?
This is not by Peel.
Okay.
And so here it was just kind of a symbol of beauty. But I wanted to give you an idea of the kind of things he was looking at and saying, I can do that, and learning how to do. Now, people liked the kind of painting he was made, and I have not shown you any of his early paintings yet. But they liked him well enough and thought he was promising enough to send him off to Boston, where the great American portrait painter John Singleton Copley was painting. You've seen his paintings. He was a fine portrait painter. And Peel, the guy I'm talking about today, went up to Boston and traded John Singleton Copley a saddle for like 3 lessons. And he came back to Baltimore, and he was better. People could see he's really learned something. His paintings were getting a lot better. So they took up a collection, and they decided to send him to England, where the real good painters were.
Wow.
Before the Revolution, there was no painting school in the United States. There were no good painters, really, in the United States. But there was a successful American painter living in England. His name was Benjamin West, and they sent Charles Willson Peale. They took up a collection, put him on a boat, and sent him off to London to study with the great artist of his time. Here's a work by Benjamin West.
Ooh, wow.
And when Peale got there, he looked at a painting like this. And he said, for a while he said that, and then suddenly he realized what it meant. Look at this. This is a whole lot more complex than one painting, one portrait, right? That's what he was able to do. He was able to do one portrait. A painting like this is what we call a history painting. And this is what a great artist did at that time. It was involved not just one portrait, but involved dozens or sometimes hundreds of characters. It involved not a living day person, but it was always had to be a painting of the past. And if you look in the background, you can see this is the classical past. This is a painting of Rome. Every single character had to be painted, had to be believable. You can see nudes over here in the corner, so draped figures here. The background had to be perfect, and it had to tell an important story. This is a story from ancient Rome of Agrippina. Here she is with her daughter and her son. Her husband has been killed. He's here in the urn. And she's carrying the ashes back to the emperor to accuse him, to say, my husband was killed unjustly. Look, everybody knows she's going to be killed too. And so she's standing up for her husband, and at great cost to herself and to her children. So her friends are mourning around her. Other people are astonished looking on at what she's done. And every single figure here would not only have to be anatomically correct and all fit together. You can see the way they fit together. But actually, the way everybody's posed should have been taken from a work of ancient Greek or Roman art. So what do you have to know to make a painting like this?
A lot.
You have to know all about how to paint the figure standing, crouching, naked, covered, children, women, men. You had to know all how to put in a big landscape background, and you had to know all these stories, either from ancient Greece or ancient Rome or the Bible, to make a painting like this. A painting like this wasn't made in one afternoon in somebody's living room, which is kind of what Peale had been doing. A painting like this would take years of study and a whole group of helpers, because a painting like this is as big as what you're seeing right here. So Peale, after about a year working with Benjamin West, thought to himself, I can't really do this. Because not only did he only have a few years to study there, but he was already married and had children back in Baltimore, and he missed them terribly. Really missed them. He said, I can't stay here for 10 years learning how to do this. And so really with great regret, because what it took to be a great painter in the 18th century was the ability to paint paintings like this. He with great regret said, I can't do that. Now I want to show you another painting by Benjamin West. All I have is a black and white image of it, but I'm showing it to you for another particular reason. But I want you to see how similar, first of all, it is to this. Lots of figures, can you see them? Famous Roman background, all the arcades, the countryside in the background, Roman buildings. You can see the main figure here is somebody also who's striding forward to do something brave. It's a moral lesson for us all, even though his friends are begging him not to do it. Now, it's another history painting by Benjamin West. The reason that I'm showing it to you is, can you see this major figure right here?
Yeah.
Charles Willson Peale was the model for that while he was working in Benjamin West's studio. So he was put to work, and here he is dressed up in a toga, looking like an ancient Roman. But that's the way that he looked then, when he was studying in London and thinking to himself, I don't think I can really do this, what I set out to do. He's not naked here, so we're good with it, right?
Why
Yes.
did he paint it in black and white?
They didn't paint it in black and white, but I was unable to find, I'm so sorry, I was unable to find a photograph of the original painting. But, you know, I wanted so much to show it to you, I thought, yeah, you know, but this was made in color, just brilliant color like the other one. Yes?
If Peale was sent to America as a refugee,
Uh-huh.
how could he go back to England then? Wasn't he putting his life in danger?
Good question, and maybe I didn't make this clear. It was his father who came, who was the refugee, who was the
Criminal.
Yeah, the criminal, exactly. His father came, had the family, died, and here's Peale going back. But now you bring up an interesting point, because his father had always told his family, I was an important man, I owned properties back in England. And one of the reasons the son went back was hoping maybe he could actually cash in on some of that property. It didn't work, but he was still looking out after his family. So now he did, after a few years, say, I can't really paint this kind of painting. And so he came back to Baltimore. And he decided what he would do would be set out to be a portrait painter, which wasn't as great and as important as being a history painter, but it was good enough maybe to add to his other skills to paint a little bit and bring in some more money for his family. And one of the first earliest paintings that I can show you by Charles Willson Peale is this painting called The Family Group, and it shows his whole family. So I want you to meet the Peale family.
Beautiful.
Wow.
So first I'll tell you about it, and then introduce you to the people, and then maybe point out a few other things that you can see in here.
Very good.
So it's a big painting.
Is this considered good painting?
Yeah, but you know what? At the time, it would be a good painting in a kind of a second-rate category.
Wow.
Because to be a portrait painter wasn't as great as being a history painter. Yeah. And in a way, as I'm going to show you, this was almost a sales pitch for his ability to paint. So that would make it even less important. Because this is kind of the kind of thing that he might put out for you if you went in to say, I would like to have a painting made. He might hold this out and say, look, this is what I can do. So here's what he can do.
Is that him? With the dark hair, that's him?
Right here is him.
Oh, I thought the one sitting at the end of the table.
No, these are actually his two brothers.
Oh.
This is his wife.
Oh.
And these are two of his children. These are the people that it broke his heart to leave behind when he went to London. This is his mother over here.
Oh.
This is one of his sisters, and this is one of his sisters.
Oh,
and look the way that they're leaning on each other with their hands around each other. It's a painting that shows the family harmony. So important to him.
Then you only had 2 children.
At this point, he ended up having 17 children, although 6 of them died as very young, never lived to
And all the
maturity.
time painting, did he?
Well, she was very pretty, wasn't she? And she was the first of 3. Here she is. This is his first wife, then Rachel, and his first 2 children. This is a family kind of family retainer, but since she lived with them, she's in the picture too.
What's a family retainer?
Kind of like someone else who was a kind of a friend of the mother who lived with the family and was supported by Charles Wilson.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the whole family group at that time. And this is the dog who wasn't in the original painting, but later after the painting was finished, bravely barked and scared away a burglar, so he took the painting out and added the brave. So now let's look in the details. Here you can see in this beautiful central portrait of his wife, Rachel, that he'd been looking, can't you see, at Madonna and child paintings when he was in Europe? And it's kind of an advertisement. If you want to have maybe a Madonna and child painted, I can do that. Over on the side, here's this little group. Here is Charles Wilson himself, having come back, learned how to paint, is now teaching his 2 brothers how to draw. And here they are. You can see they're kind of goofing around, but they both learned to draw too. He taught them. And he is just kind of leaning on the shoulders. When we go back and see the whole thing, you'll see he has a palette in his hand. He's also advertising here, I can paint women, I can paint children, I can paint men and women, I can paint them face on, I can paint them in profile, I can paint them foreshortened if that's what you want. Any pose I can do.
And I can teach you how to paint.
I can teach you how to paint. In the background, he's advertising these skills that he learned in Europe. This is a sketch that he made of the three graces from a Raphael painting. So he's kind of advertising, I've been there, I've done that. If you want classical style painting, I can do that too. Up in the right-hand corner are portrait busts, not only advertising the skill that he has in painting from them. The middle one is himself. He's advertising here. You want a plaster portrait bust? I can do that for you too. And I can do still lifes too if you want a still life. Here's a still life on the table showing, like the kind of Dutch still life you would have seen when he was in London, with the knife kind of coming off showing, so dramatically real looking. And a symbol of his name, an orange peel. So the whole painting, including the dog, is not only kind of a celebration of his family that he was so close to and felt so much that his father was gone, he was going to teach and support these people, but also the kind of painting that really, if you went into his studio and wanted to buy, would be a good advertisement for him. And so this was the kind of work that he started doing after he returned from London for the next couple of years until 1776, when something happened that put most artists in the United States out of business.
Oh, yeah.
You all know what it was.
Yeah.
Because during wartime, people are not so interested in sitting for full-size portraits or buying still lifes or anything like that. Now, you all know this painting, and of course you know that this was not done by Charles Willson Peale. This famous painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware to New Jersey, my home state. What's amazing is that Charles Willson Peale didn't make this famous painting. He was in one of the boats. No way. He went and fought with the American Army and the Colonial Army. He knew George Washington. He spent a winter, you remember Valley Forge, that terrible winter at Valley Forge where everybody froze? He was there. He actually had found an old coat. Remember, he was a saddle maker. He knew how to sew leather. He made that coat into booties for the men underneath he also that winter poured leather bullets together in one of those little huts with George Washington.
Leather bullets?
What? Sorry. Molten iron bullets, lead bullets. Yeah, sorry. I'm over enthusiastic here. But anyway, he crossed the Delaware that night and fought in the battles in New Jersey. So he was there, and also when they weren't fighting, was going back to Baltimore and then he moved his family to Philadelphia. He thought it would be safer. He was going back there to try to make a little bit of money and support people, and then going back to the war. And he was actually in one of the governments down there that when the colonies were running their own governments during the war, he was one of the congressmen in those governments too, when those local state governments. But he did discover that there was one kind of painting that was important in the 18th century, even during wartime, and it was miniatures. Because before photography, especially if you were going off to war, you'd want to leave behind a miniature, which is like a little watercolor painting on ivory, of the way you looked for the people that you loved. And you'd want to take along one of the people that you loved to remember during those hard times when you were by yourself. This is Peale's self-portrait. It's about this big, and he made this for Rachel. And here is Rachel, made to take along with him. Now, during those winters and times when there was no battle being fought, people saw this, and they really wanted to have him make them for them too. Miniatures to give home to their wives, or in town, miniatures of their wives and their children to bring along with them into battle. So he found possibly the only way that he could have made money as an artist during the war, and he painted many, many miniatures, including a miniature of George Washington for Martha. So this was the first of 7 times that Washington posed for Peale. He posed for a miniature, and then 6 later times after the war was over, he posed for Peale. And Peel would bring along his brother, remember the one he was teaching to paint? So he could paint too. In fact, there were Peel brothers all lined up around George Washington, and he said he was peeled all around. The puns do not stop. So anyway, this was how he actually broke into painting these people with whom he fought, because he was himself one of the great patriots of the Revolutionary War. When the war was over, people did start to make money again, and they did want paintings. And the number one painting that they wanted was George Washington. And so he had, having painted Washington, he had kind of his own way of making money. He knew Washington, he made one painting of him and then copied it. And so for the next 20 years, lots of people wanted paintings of George Washington. And so they would come, remember this was before photography, before mechanical reproduction, they would go to Charles Willson Peale and you could order a George Washington the size that you chose.
Now didn't he have students that would just reproduce them, just copy them?
He had his children.
Oh, great.
Yeah. But most of these we believe were from his hand.
Wow.
And he painted 60 of them, we think.
Oh, wow.
Oh, right.
Okay? So you could order George however you wanted him. You could order a bust length. You could order kind of 3/4 length. These are all by Charles Willson Peale. You could order full length. If you had served with George Washington, you might want a particular uniform shown or a particular background, and you could order that. So here he is in one uniform with background, and here he is, this is a different painting, different uniform. Because, you know, if you served with him in New Jersey, you want to see him the way you remembered him. And the more elaborate it got, of course, the more it cost.
Did you go back to the other one?
Sure.
Oh, wow.
So he's just copying, but he's filling in what people asked. Sometimes maybe you'd have the background, which is where you had fought with Washington. If you paid a little bit more, you could have yourself painted in. So this is Washington and Lafayette, you'll remember him, and Tillman, Major Tillman, who paid for the painting and had himself painted in. So for several years, Charles Willson Peale could support his family and everybody around him by painting George Washington, till the market was glutted and that was over. Now, you're kind of looking at these and you're probably saying, you know, that doesn't look that great to me. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is, of course, it got stale to him. He was never a great full-length body painter. You can kind of see there's something that doesn't look so great about this full-length body. And you all know a more famous painter of George Washington, and that's Gilbert Stuart. So we're used to seeing this George Washington, not Charles Willson Peale. I missed a couple pictures in there.
Is that one of the brothers?
This is one of the brothers, and I'm sorry because I want to go back and see. Didn't I miss some pictures? No, I guess not. Sorry, the technology's still new to me. Good, because the next the brother is just what I wanted to tell you. If you were looking at those George Washingtons and saying he wasn't really much of a painter, then I want you to look, because he was getting kind of stale on that subject, he painted it 60 times. Yeah. Look at this painting of his brother James, the one who was getting the painting lesson, by Charles Willson Peale, by the brother. And you can see that this is really a very fine portrait, where it was new to him, it was someone that he loved. You can see, you know, not only the great details of this jacket, his hair, his flesh looking real, the whole pose being one of an alert guy painting miniatures, because Charles Willson Peale taught his brother to do that too, and looking up, a little still life subject down here of the water glass from the watercolor, looking up with a look of great intelligence and love on his face.
He's got beautiful eyes.
To be in the painting, yeah.
You know, the ability to do that too without, they didn't have the best eyeglasses.
That's right.
For their vision.
Yeah.
And have you ever seen the little brushes that have, like, they paint these little miniatures with one hair?
Wow.
Don't they?
They must be, yeah, because look at the
Same
tiny
with the
brushes
Russian
he has
boxes.
here. Yeah, to paint that tiny little thing. Yeah, yeah.
They have like one bristle.
So if you were looking at these paintings and saying, I agree with what she said to start with, not much of a painter, I really think it's better to look at something like this to make your judgment about.
Well, his figures look, even the women look like they're 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
The proportions are amazing.
Yeah. Well, you know, he had not finished his studying.
Well, that's true.
And he also had learned something in, he was never a great, maybe never a great painter at all, never a great figure painter. And he had learned something in Europe that was very popular, and it was called the line of beauty. Now, there was a novel about that a couple of years ago. And the idea was that this kind of twist is what made a figure really, really beautiful. And you'll see that all of his full-length portraits have it in it. And to us, it just looks distorted. It does look, his head's too small for his body. Yeah. I agree with you 100%, but I don't think that's true here.
Maybe
Everything's in
small head.
proportion here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe he had a small head.
It could be, but we can see that he didn't when Gilbert Stuart painted him. So at any rate, you remember James was getting those lessons.
Yeah.
Here he is painted by his brother. He actually turned out to be quite a successful painter. He made beautiful still life paintings. And still life paintings were very popular in the new United States because they were a symbol of what came from our new earth.
What is that?
This is a cabbage.
The thing at the bottom.
This
the
thing,
red
I have
ball.
no idea. Anybody know? Anybody know? It's got like pomegranate seeds in it, but it's not a pomegranate.
It's like corn.
And the title doesn't tell us. Yeah. But this is the kind of work that James really loved to do. Now, there was a small market for still life paintings, but when James came of age, there was still a big market for George Washington's. This was James' painting of George Washington, because he too painted George Washington's over and over again while there was a market. And you can see he was copying his brother's painting here and selling them to people who admired and loved George Washington and wanted to have a painting on their wall. Now, he painted a lot of the other patriots too. In fact, he knew almost everybody, and a whole lot of people wanted these paintings. So this is Thomas Jefferson.
I was going to
So
say.
I
Were you
got
going
it
to say?
right.
Looking a little windblown, I'd say.
Yeah.
But notice the format, which is like a miniature.
Right.
And it's not only that way in which it's different than the kind of portrait you would have found in Europe at the same time. Here is a portrait by Charles Wilson Peale of
Benjamin
Franklin. And I want you to look at it because I want you to see how special American portraits were. You can see him here. You can see the lightning out the window. Is that how you knew it was him? Because
Looks like him.
it looks like him, but it's not a really glamorized painting, is it?
No.
He looks older, he looks tired, he's got his work here at his elbow, he's got the red curtain behind him to make him stand out, but he looks like he might have looked, especially compared to Benjamin West's portrait of Benjamin Franklin. Now remember, Benjamin West was that London artist who Charles Wilson Peale studied with. So now this is the work by Charles Wilson Peale, my hero today. Here's the painting by his teacher of Benjamin Franklin. Much more dramatic.
I like the other one better.
The other one is more what Americans liked.
Yeah.
The other one by Charles Wilson Peale is pretty staid, pretty realistic. He's just sitting there. There's a memory of what he's done out the
I
window.
like this one best.
He looks the way he's supposed to.
He looks the way he looks to Americans. But the style in Europe was to make everything much more romantic. So here he's actually outside in the storm. He's actually got the key coming down out of that stormy sky, and he's actually reaching up, and you can see the lightning. It's the moment of inspiration. He's got a curtain, a red behind him, but it's not just a curtain in a window, it's his robe blowing around. And he's surrounded by science-making cherubs. They're helping with the experiment. They're helping down here with an experiment. The wind is blowing through, and look at his face. Look how much better he looks.
I didn't think he was that
It's
skinny.
the God connection between God and science.
Yep, you're exactly right. But it's also the romantic hero connection. And so you can see that this is the style that Americans liked in their portraiture. They liked somebody that if they knew him, they liked him to look like they knew. And in Europe, it was more the style to show kind of exactly the spirit of the person, even more than the physical nature of the person. And this is the kind of style that really didn't fly here so much in the United States. And that's why all these pictures from Charles Wilson Peale's hand look very humdrum to us. This is John Adams, and this is John Quincy Adams. And all the heroes, he painted them all. So, at a certain point, when the market for George Washington's had dried up, It was back on Charles Wilson Peale to start supporting his family again. And this was what he thought. What do we have? Well, I've got a whole range of paintings of the American heroes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my home in hopes that the generation that fought the war will bring the next generation in and show them these heroes. Maybe they'll ask me for another painting. Maybe they'll commission a John Quincy Adams or a George Washington from me. But what I'm going to do is open my home and show what I have here as, it turned out, the very first public museum in the United States. And paintings of the heroes was just the beginning of what Charles Wilson Peale had. He had all those, but he had other paintings that he had made too that were hung in the museum. This is a painting by Charles Wilson Peale of Yarrow Mammoet, who was the oldest African American living in the colonies in the United States at that time. And that was important. He painted him, and you could see this in the Peale Museum.
Was that very unusual, right, to
take that as a subject? Yeah.
A lot of character.
And why would I love it, but why did he choose to do that?
Because, as you will see, everything that was of our country, everything that was natural was of interest to him.
Oh.
One of the things that you could see in the Peale Museum was a box of live rattlesnakes. Now remember, this was their home. And one of the sons' job every morning was to go in and feed the rattlesnakes.
Rattlesnakes.
No, live rattlesnakes. Okay? So paintings was just the beginning of it, and he painted everything. Everything that was of interest, or, and you can see, once again, if you're thinking, was he a good artist or not a good artist? Look at the affection and the humanities that he's shown in the face of someone who a lot of people wouldn't have even looked at.
There's a lot of character in that face.
Exactly. So now, if you went in, I know, the clothes are wonderful, aren't they?
Well, they put good clothes on there.
But look at this little knitted cap.
Yeah.
Got a propeller?
You could make paintings or drawings of yourself. He had invented something called a physiognotrace, that you could actually use this little machine to cut out profiles of yourself. So you could see profiles in there. This is George and Martha Washington, but you could make them of yourself too if you wanted in the Peale Museum. There were paintings in there that were jokes, and this is one of the most famous paintings by Charles Wilson Peale. Here's the joke. You can see it's two young boys. They were actually sons, some of these many sons of Charles Wilson Peale. It is Rembrandt and Titian Peale. And you might think that the joke was their names, because those are the names of very, very famous Renaissance artists. That wasn't the joke. He named all of his children after scientists and artists. The same way that some people would get names from a Bible and enter names in a Bible, he had a list of famous historical artists. And he took all the names from there and entered all the historical names in there. So there was a Rembrandt, there were two Titians, because the first one passed away, there was a Rubens, there was a Sophonisba, there were all artists and then scientists. There was Charles Linnaeus, there was Benjamin Franklin.
About the women, the girls, did they?
The girls had names too, although Angelica Kaufman was one of the names. But there were fewer historical artists, women known by name. So they were not, there wasn't such a richness of names for girls. Okay, so here they are. This is a painting by Charles Wilson Peale of two of his sons. You can see he's trained them to be artists. They're going up a flight of stairs. The older one is going up with a maul stick and a palette in his hand, looking quite brave, looking down the stairs at whoever might be looking up. The younger son is looking around the corner, just kind of sticking his face out into the light. You can see him looking much shyer here. Okay, going up the stairs. Now the joke is that this painting is absolutely life-size. And this is how it was displayed in the museum.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
With a frame around it like it was a real door and a real flight of stairs, and the bottom stair was really built out. So it was what we call a trompe-l'oeil, a fool-the-eye painting. And if you walked past, you thought for a second it was a real staircase. And George Washington visited the museum and doffed his cap to the boys. So it was a joke painting, kind of. So you could see this in the Peale Museum. You could also see some of very sad paintings. This is a painting of Rachel. Here she is grieving over one of the little children who died early. And look how truth-telling this is. You can see that she's been working to save the life of the little child, who is clearly dead. Here her face is torn apart by her grief and her sorrow and her tiredness. Here are the medications that didn't work. This was in the museum too, but he hid it behind a curtain so that if you didn't want your children to see it, they wouldn't have to see it. So every sort of thing, every sort of painting, every sort of thing was in the museum. Here is a ticket to the museum. And you can see it says, "The birds and the beasts will teach thee." It's "Admit the bearer to Peals Museum," and it's signed by Rubens Peale. And this isn't really advertising art at all. It's advertising all the sorts of animals, living and stuffed, that you could see in the museum. Because Peale taught himself how to do taxidermy. And if you got, he would send out people who would bring back pelts, and he would he almost killed himself using lead doing it. But, he had stuffed animals and live animals and all the portraits. And the great success of the museum, he had a skeleton of what he called the mastodon.
Oh my goodness.
So I want to tell you about this because this was the great coup, and this was the thing that made Peale's name known not just over the United States, but all around the world. This is a drawing by one of his sons of the mastodon bones. So here's what happened. He had heard that there were huge bones being dug up in Newburgh, New York, a little bit up the Hudson River from where Manhattan is. Maybe some of you come from that part of the country. There's a huge kind of marl pit, a swamp, and people were finding giant bones there. So he immediately got on the ferry and went up there. And he bought the piece of property, and he decided to excavate the bones. Because it was clear that there was no animal like this living in the United States at the time, and he wanted to have it in his museum. So he bought the property, and here is what it looked like as he excavated the mastodon. It was like a swamp, so the first thing he had to do was get the water out of the hole. And so here he designed and built what's like a huge hamster wheel, dragging the water up out. It was turned by visitors because people would go up to see the mastodon. He'd put them to work, turning this big wheel, dragging the water out of the pit.
Wonderful.
As you look down here, are people finding the bones as the water level goes down and handing them up to him. This is him over here. So the whole, all these workers at work, here he is, and actually saying, "Here are the bones." He's like hosting us at his site. "Here are the bones, and here is a drawing of the bones." And his entire family is drawn here behind him. They're all bringing out the bones. Over on the other side, you can see that there's a woman over here. Well, Rachel by this time has passed away. He's married to a second wife, Elizabeth. But you know what? Rachel was part of his life, so he put her in here too. This is Rachel, who had died a few years before, and she's kind of grabbing this boy and warning him because, if we go back to the whole thing, there's a huge storm coming. And of course, what's that going to mean to this excavation? So she is warning. You see her back here. She's pointing up, directing our attention to the storm that's coming. Meanwhile, everybody's working even faster, and the host is showing us, pointing down, see the bones being taken out.
Well, I think it's sort of odd. It's sort of a little funny place. He's got his hand gestured, and just above it is the man's rear end.
It is kind of odd, yeah. Here's the whole thing. And you can see what he's trying to do here is lead our art away, around to show how nature is trying to withhold this information, and man working together gets that information whether nature wants to or not. Now, what I want you to notice is that this man who failed to paint history paintings 20 years before has finally painted a history painting here. It's got a cast of thousands. It's got a moral lesson to it, which is we struggle with nature, but nature gives up its truth. We struggle in the face of this. It's got poses. This is actually a famous pose from ancient Greek sculpture here. And it's got a story, and it's not about Greece or Rome or the Bible. It's about America today. So finally, he actually did succeed in making a history painting for himself.
What's this man on the very far to the left? Very, very edge. Let's see, he's got.
This guy?
Yeah. What's
I
that?
don't know. Can you tell?
I can't see.
This guy's playing a guitar, which is kind of nice. He provided some, entertainment.
It looks like he's taking a picture.
It does look like he's taking a picture. Yeah. So it's not big enough, you know, and you can see that his body skills, his body painting skills are still somewhat questionable.
And what, the little tent in the back of their,
Yep, well, because, you know, he hired a bunch of people to do this work.
Oh, that might be the privy.
It could be the privy, could be the privy. So, you know, carefully placed away from the work site. Yeah. So anyway, the bones emerged, and he put them together. And in fact, he made a few mistakes because he had the giant tusks going down into the chest cavity, so he would have impaled himself as he walked. But this was really the first time that anyone had thought, let's not just dig up the bones and show them, let's try to figure out what the animal was. And that was the great success of the Peel Museum. That's what brought people from all around the world, if they were traveling in Philadelphia now, that's where the museum was, to see the great museum. And so here is a self-portrait of Peel himself welcoming you to his museum.
Does it still continue?
No. Well, there is a Peel Museum. He tried to sell the whole collection to the government. The government didn't want to buy, so it was sold out. Most of it was sold to Barnum, to P.T. Barnum. So now they're trying to collect pieces of it together, and there is a Peel Museum in Baltimore that you can go to, but most of the pieces have been dispersed.
He's getting a little pudgy
Yeah, he
there.
is. Well, he was getting on a little bit.
Well, no, it's his jacket.
He's got his jacket. His jacket is open, but he does have a little belly. But now as you look in the background, you'll see everything that I told you about was in there. You can see all along, can you see these gold frames up there?
Oh, yeah.
Those are all the paintings, around the oval paintings of the heroes. And below them, these cases, those are all the taxidermied animals of America. Now, it was his idea not to just put them out there, but to actually put them in a case and make a painting in the background that would show where they came from. Now, you've all seen that at natural history museums. Peel's the one who invented it. And each one of these has one of the animals of America. These are birds on this side. And if you look up here, you can see the bald eagle. Can you see it? The bald eagle. The bald eagle. Because when all the people who went to design national seals or money or coins needed a bald eagle to paint, this is the one that they came to look at. So it is, in a way, the bald eagle. Now, do you remember that there were a bunch of people, including Benjamin Franklin, who didn't think that the bald eagle should be our symbol? Do you remember what they thought should be our symbol?
The wild turkey.
Wild turkey. Peel was of that school of thought. And right down here is a wild turkey with all the implements that a taxidermist would use. He's kind of still putting in a little plug for the turkey. And here is a wild turkey right down here. Behind the curtain, you can see the chest of the giant mastodon. And you can see some of the bones not yet in place. Peel is welcoming you in, and you can see over here his palette. Because he felt very strongly that someplace along the line to being a fine artist, he put his painting aside, put it in the second place. And he had given his attention over to all these other undertakings, and that he could have been a great artist if he had just kind of fitted his sights on one thing rather than being interested in everything. And he wrote a very, I'll be right back, he wrote a very touching letter to Thomas Jefferson where he said that. He said, if I had fixed my interest on any one task, I could have been really good at it. But instead, I was interested in everything. And although a lot of people would regret that, it was one of the great pleasures of my life. Yes,
Do you
sir.
think the mastodon was probably one of the first prehistoric animals found in our country?
I think it was.
Is
Yeah.
it still around? Do you know?
No, it was taken apart. Yeah, I mean, Barnum and P.T. Barnum bought it. Then there was a huge fire. A lot of stuff was destroyed. So it's not one of those that we see anymore. And he probably kind of wrapped it up pretty well, putting it together. But it did travel. One of them, he had two then. One of them actually traveled to Europe, and was, one of the sons took it on tour to Europe. Yes.
What's that down the bottom? Looks like a bird's nest.
This?
Yes.
This is actually one of the jaws of one of those ancient animals.
Oh.
It's big teeth sticking up here.
I thought it was a bird's nest with birds in it.
I like his body language. It suggests a very open and generous person.
Yeah, it does.
His outturned hand is very sweet.
And notice also that he's showing just what he hoped for. Women and husbands, and they're bringing their children to see the wonders of this country. The heroes of the country, the natural wonders of the country, the snakes of the country, whatever there was, would be in here. Now, you know, I'm going on long. Shall I wind up here?
No, keep
No, it's
going.
wonderful.
Keep going, keep going.
Okay, if you need to leave or something,
No,
please
wait,
feel free.
no confinement.
Okay.
He was truly a jack of all trades.
He was. So he decided that he had made a mistake in trying to be a jack of all trades. And he was determined that his children were not going to make the same mistake. Each was going to be set on one path. He was going to launch them on that path, and they were not going to make this mistake of spreading themselves too thin.
And then they went into therapy.
Yes, unfortunately, some were not happy with that. So this is a self-portrait of his oldest surviving son, Rembrandt Peale. And Charles Wilson, the father, said, "You show great promise as an artist. You are going to be the artist that I could never be." And so this is his self-portrait.
Beautiful.
Charles Wilson Peale actually sent Rembrandt off to London to study with Benjamin West, thinking that maybe you can stick it out, maybe you can become the great artist that I never ever became. And he stayed there for several years, and he learned from West, and he learned that the great artists make history paintings. And when he came back, this is the painting that he tried to sell in America.
Oh, God.
Now, it's a history painting, it's a famous story, would be famous to you at the time, although it looks odd to us now. It's the story of this Roman hero who they weren't going to kill him. They were going to put him in a cell and let him starve to death. And his daughter, who was married and had a young child, was allowed to visit him while he starved to death. And here you can see the Roman daughter actually giving suck to her father to try to preserve his life. Another heroic story, known to everybody at the time, although not known to us, and of interest to us today, because who posed for the Roman father? Charles Wilson Peale here posed for his son in making this painting.
Is this a mythology, this story?
This is a story, it's kind of it's not a myth, it's a story that maybe, that from Roman history, maybe not true, maybe true or not true.
Who's a woman?
All we know is that she was called the Roman daughter, and this is the Roman father. And of course the story is that the captors were so amazed by her selflessness that he let them both go. Yeah. So anyway, this is the kind of painting that Rembrandt came back and painted, and just like his father was never able to sell history paintings have never been successful in this country, he could not sell this kind of painting. But the years were turning, there was another generation of people thinking about the heroes, and he was able to sell paintings of George Washington. So this is not by Charles Wilson Peale, this is by his son Rembrandt, who was like a little kid the last time Washington came to sit for his father. And he painted dozens of George Washingtons. This one looks very, very much like a Gilbert Stuart. And you could have them in any uniform that you chose. This was a background that he invented. It was called the porthole picture. And you could have, you know, full length, you could have half length, you could have bust length. And that's how Rembrandt Peale ended up supporting his family, pretty much making paintings like this. Now, once again, you may be saying to yourself, not a great artist. But once again, I want to show you a work from his hand where he wasn't just trying to make money to support his family, but where he was painting someone he loved. This is Rembrandt Peale's painting of his brother Rubens Peale. And here I think you have to look at this and say, he was an amazing portrait painter.
The love father and son have for when they love their subject, which is their family members. I mean, the love is amazing.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Now this is Rubens, who, look at it, you can read it right off of it, was very, very shy, loved plants. And once again, this is the geranium. This is the first geranium that was ever sent to the United States. And of course, if you were going to send a rare plant someplace in the United States, you were going to send it to the Peale Museum. Rubens loved plants, and he loved the museum. So here he is showing off what looks to us like kind of a sad geranium, but to him was like an amazing success story. The geranium arrives in North America.
From where, England? Or?
I don't know where it came from.
And why does he have two sets of glasses? He's wearing one.
Good question. He has one down here. In fact, I brought you that detail to show you that. Because his brother, many of you wear glasses. How many of you had been photographed and you said, I'm going to take off my glasses for my picture? And then people look at your picture and they say it doesn't look like you without your glasses. So his mother first painted him with his glasses in his hand with no glasses on. And then the family looked at it and said, but it really doesn't look like Rubens without his glasses. We know he can't see without his glasses. So we went back and painted them in, along with the refraction of the light. Can you see it? So you can see here, if you're going to judge Rembrandt, Peale is a portrait painter too, let's judge him here. Because as you said, the affection, the detail, the organization, the sense that you have of this person who went on to run the Peale Museum, he liked to be a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, is very, very evident in this painting, which for a while was sold at the highest price of any American painting that ever was sold.
And this is the son of...
This was, yes, this painting is the son Rembrandt painting the son Rubens.
Oh, it's painting his brother.
Yeah, it's painting his brother, right. Now, this is a painting...
Show emotion, doesn't it?
Wow.
It does. This is a painting made by Rubens, who did learn how to paint.
Yeah.
And then another, but he mostly painted natural subjects. Did not paint, he went out and painted the kinds of things that would be in the museum. Now another brother, Titian II, actually became a very, very well-known artist, painter of the natural world. And he went on several of those trips that the government sent people on. They would send ornithologists, they would send surveyors, they would send, out to the West to see what is this country that we have here. And in fact, he traveled all across the West with those expeditions, and then ended up traveling to Hawaii and across the Pacific Ocean, making paintings all the way, registering what this new land was like.
Now, are these watercolors or are they oil? The ones...
This is a watercolor. Yeah.
Wow. Well preserved.
Are those pheasants or?
Yeah, those are pheasants. No, I'm sorry, this is a wild turkey.
Turkey.
Yeah. Those are grouse.
Do you know why, what was the discussion, or does anybody know why the argument between the eagle and the turkey, what the
What was the problem?
Yeah,
the eagle was a scavenger.
And the turkey was a life rider.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the first meal.
The first meal, it was symbolic in the United States. It was, it was a bird that, that actually was something that you could keep in your yard. It was beautiful, and the eagle was a scavenger, ate carrion.
Tasted good.
So, that was the big argument.
You can't eat
Christmas cake, it looks like Italian Christmas cake.
It is like a Christmas cake. And this painting was actually made by another one of the sons. These paintings were made by Raphael, the son. And Raphael became an incredible still life painter. But his most famous painting is this.
Wow.
Do you remember the stairway portrait that we saw that was kind of a joke? It was a trompe l'oeil, fool the eye painting. This is one made by Raphael, who was always the practical joker. And if there was anything that his father really didn't like, it was a practical joker. He was a ventriloquist, which everybody thought was in very, very poor taste. He would, he would make jokes all the time. And this painting is a joke because he painted nudes, which his father also didn't approve. And Raphael's wife did not approve either. And so this is a painting that looks for all the world as if he was painting a nude. You can see her hands here wringing out her wet hair, and bare feet down here. And the idea was that it was supposed to be, the trick was supposed to be on his wife, who would come down the stairs, fling open the door to the studio, and think, well, he was painting a nude, and he just hung one of my napkins over it. But of course the napkin's painted on too. And the joke was that she grabbed for the napkin, and of course that's painted on. There is no nude underneath. It's a fool the eye painting, but it's a trick.
That's funny.
So several of these sons actually became, in their different ways, hugely successful painters. And not only that, but all of James' daughters became very successful painters. And the nieces and the nephews and generations after that. There's 5 generations of Peals who went on to become famous, some of them famous businessmen of other sorts, but many of them famous and successful, very successful artists.
Any of them paint today?
No, they're pretty much died out right now. Now, the end of his life, I want to tell you about my last few slides because I'm almost done and I'm sorry to be so long. He became pretty successful, and also, you know the way that it is, his sons kind of wanted to take over the museum and the business, and they were kind of wishing that he would take his elderly ways and move out of town. So he did. He bought this little piece of property, which is actually still preserved as a farm. He called it Belfield. And he went out there and did, to the horror of his children and his grandchildren, but the particular horror of the in-laws, continued to do scientific experiments and make, make discoveries. You could find him like climbing around on the roof, figuring out a new way to make like a windmill. He invented this velocipede here in his sketch. Wow. It was a bicycle that doesn't have a chain. So you kind of walk it up the hills, and then you could roll down the hills. And this is a self-portrait of him on his velocipede at Belfield. He invented porcelain false teeth in the United States. He just, he was a man, as you can see, of many interests. Like you said, a jack of all trades. Now, at this time in his life, in 1827, his third wife had passed away. All of his children were out of the house. And he was terribly lonely. You knew that he loved to be surrounded by his family. It was critically important to him. So he heard that there was a woman who might make a good fourth wife in New York. So he got on the ferry and he went up there. She was a retired school teacher, and he introduced himself. And, they kind of met, and they decided that it wouldn't work out probably for them. But he made her a set of porcelain false teeth. Then he got on the ferry to come back to Philadelphia.
Wedding present.
And what happened was there was an extremely low tide. And the ferry got hung up before it actually could come up to the dock. Everybody else said, well, we'll wait for the high tide. But not Peel. He jumped overboard. He was fine, but he caught his death of cold and died about a week later.
Oh.
So, he was still living his life up to the very, very last.
What age?
I can't do the subtraction. So he was born in 41 and died in 27.
Wow.
So it was not, he lived for his time, and for a guy who had jumped into the river.
Yeah, really.
86.
So I want you to think, now that you've seen this, first of all, wasn't he an amazing American?
Yes.
And an incredible patriot, an incredible scientist, a hugely successful, in most cases, father.
Intelligent man.
And now it's up to you. A second-rate painter?
No.
Thank you so much for coming.
Are his paintings collected in many galleries today?
Yeah, they are all over the place. Like I said, they're starting to try to recollect them at the Peals Museum. A lot of them are in Philadelphia because that's kind of where they went into private places. So a lot of these most famous ones are in Philadelphia.
Did he move to Philadelphia from Maryland?
Yeah, they went back and forth. In fact, for a while, he had started another museum in Manhattan, and he started one in Utica. So, and then they would fail, but the final museum while he was alive was in Philadelphia. But the museum now that's called the Peals Museum, where they're recollecting, is in Baltimore. Yes?
Since I don't know that part of the country too much, is the Delaware River really that rough?
As rough as
It wasn't that picture.
in the Leutze painting. What it does is it does freeze over, and that's what he's showing you there.
But it was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
It was a horrible winter, it's true.
And there was no moon that night. It was a ridiculously risky thing to do.
Yeah. A lot of the boats turned back. But I think everybody agrees that even though people with no sense might have gotten onto the water the way he shows it, the horses would not have.
Yeah, right.
So I think probably there was more freeboard in the boats. The water wasn't quite so terrible, because otherwise they all would have drowned on the way, I think. But it was a terrible, terrible night. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation.
My pleasure.
And I was thinking as you were going through and describing every single thing, that everything he saw, he became interested in. And today, a lot of people might call this attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And the reason I'm saying that is that I understand it very well. And it is a what some people joke as shiny object, shiny object, shiny object. That you're attracted to this and that. But some people carry it off so wonderfully, and this and the genuineness of his interest. You picked up on that so wonderfully. I mean, this wasn't simply a flash in the pan on each of these things. This was something that each time he pursued with real enthusiasm and real and so it gives some of us who share in that kind of thing a real hope that that we do get to do some things quite well, but the variety of things makes us very interesting. And if he's not a perfect painter, he's an interesting painter and an interesting character, and his character that you were able to show to us in both his family. I mean, it's rare that we get a chance to see someone's family life and their national life and their travel and their actual work. So thank you. It's wonderful.
Very high functioning
Well,
ADHD, not handicapped by it.
You know, Lisa said that this was her favorite talk, and so next year we'll have to do with one that is not maybe your favorite.
All of your talks are her favorite.
Thank you.
Yeah, they
He
have.
paints
They
from the
have.
heart.
Nancy?
Yeah, to Steve's comments, all along I was thinking he would have been considered very eccentric had he not been grounded by his family. I think that's what grounded him, and he just was able to flourish because of his family.
And he didn't abandon his family, maybe like some of the diplomats that went to England, like, ooh, look at all these lovely women.
Could I ask us to just for a moment, we'll have a word of prayer and thanksgiving for the food that we're about to eat. Let us pray. Thank you, God, for everything you do for us, and thank you for minds to be further opened and eyes to see. Thank you for ears to hear and for new information about our own history, our own past. Thank you for our group, SAGES, and for those who were able to be here today, and we pray that you will be with those who weren't able to be with us today. And thank you for the food that we're about to eat. We ask only that you would strengthen us through this food, that we might serve you by serving others. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you.